This is former WWE and TNA superstar Luke, the DOC Gallows, and tune in to Inside the Ropes every Thursday night.
The unexpected, fear will come to haunt you like a breath of darkness riding in the wind. And it will drag you to the bowels of evil. Pray the wild bill's curse doesn't ride again. A dead man's hand, a dead man's face. Hold them walls and you may never escape. A dead man's hand, a dead man's fate. Everybody feels the aces and eights.
And we're back on Inside the Ropes, and tonight is a massive show. We've obviously got Jim Cornette on the show later on, but we had to bring on the man that everybody's talking about right now. You'll know him as Doc of the Aces and Eights stable from TNA. You might remember him as Luke Gallows of the Straight Edge Society with CM Punk in the WWE. You might remember him from Ring Ka King. And if you go far back enough, you might even remember him as Festus of the Biscuit and Gravy loving tag team Jesse and Festus. It's the one and only Mr. Luke Gallows. Luke, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me on. What's going on, guys?
Yeah, really good, really good. And like I said in the intro there, you are the guy that everyone's talking about right now. And I guess, we may as well address the elephant in the room. You came out on Twitter on Tuesday and explained that your contract had expired with TNA, no longer part of the company. And I think everyone's just kind of a bit puzzled because you were heavily featured on television, and even from last week's Impact show, it kind of seemed like there was going to be big plans for your character going forward. So can you just sort of explain what the situation is and what kind of happened?
Yeah, I mean, I think that absolutely there were big plans going forward, and part of me is unhappy that we didn't get to go that route. But this decision, I think on mutual sides was a strictly business decision. I really enjoyed the year I had being part of TNA. I enjoyed the people I worked with. I was with some of my best friends doing the Aces and Eights storyline, and some really, really, really fine people there. But, at the end of the day, business is business. So I had to weigh my other opportunities, and I think that TNA was looking at where they're at, I guess, business-wise as well, and we could not mutually agree on something for both of us. That doesn't mean that the door's closed for anything in the future. I don't think that the parting was bad or hasty on either side. I do think it's a bit of a shame that the fans wouldn't get to see, kind of what was in store going forward. But that's the nature of the beast. Sometimes I got a lot of things in the works right now, and I'm going to go do some other things in wrestling that I've been wanting to do again, and move forward from there. But again, the door's never closed. I really feel like I'm starting to come into my prime right now. My 30th birthday is not until the end of this year, and I think that there's a lot of big stuff coming for Luke Gallows, Doc, Drew Hankinson, whatever you want to call me, and my fire and passion for wrestling are alive more now than ever. So you just have to see what happens next.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely see throughout the kind of Aces and Eights storyline that you were a very kind of featured part of that storyline, and you'd worked a few matches for TNA before, and then it was last year when you came in as part of the Aces and Eights, and I think if I remember correctly, I think you'd maybe worked a match in a house show as an Aces and Eights guy before you properly came in.
No.
Or did you just come in as with the Aces and Eights angle?
I came in with the Aces and Eights angle. TNA had talked shortly after I left WWE, and they didn't have anything creatively then for me. So I went about, doing my international stuff that I was doing there. And then when the Aces and Eights thing came up, they brought me in, and, they were ready to do something. So the first time that they did like an Aces and Eights beatdown, I was not a part of it. But from the second one on, I was there. And I think, it was pretty obvious to people that it was me because of the way that I move and my size and things like that. So I was there from that second thing that they did up until this week, So
And how did you feel about? Because I mean, when anyone looks at your career so far, you've played some pretty versatile characters so far. How did you feel? How was the sort of Aces and Eights thing pitched to you, and how did you feel about being part of that kind of biker gang and being with those other guys?
Well, the biker thing, to me, that was a reason that I wanted to do it when I heard about the Aces and Eights thing, was because of all the things that I've kind of done. I thought that it was probably the closest that I had become to showing a side of my real self a little bit, other than, you can't really show much of a sense of humor when you're a big badass biker. But I got to be me a little bit more, and I think that people could see that, and I enjoyed it. I think that people kind of dug it, whether they liked me or they hated me and stuff like that. So, that's one of the things that it's kind of a shame that, we couldn't come to terms, because, who knows where that would have gone. I think that there would have been some strong momentum, for a possible turn or anything like that,
Mm-hmm. I mean, there seemed to be a lot of kind of excitement from fans when obviously it was revealed in April that Billy was behind the group, and because there had been a really long-term plan thought out. Were you guys kept kind of up to date on everything that was happening for quite a while, or were you kind of were the creative sort of keeping some things back so that it wouldn't leak out or anything?
I think that as I went along there and people got to know me and my character as a real person and a performer and stuff like that, it's like being anywhere else, that you gain a little bit of a trust and stuff like that, and then, they kind of open the doors to you about, what's happening. I'm sure I don't know 100% what the plan was for the next year or anything, but, as kind of that angle developed and the hoods were taken off and the reveals were made, and, the guys in the group became tighter, and we all got, tighter with officials in the company and stuff. They had a pretty, we had a pretty clear view of exactly, where we were headed.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that. I don't want to give anything away and spoil it for the fans, because I don't know.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're all going to have to tune in tonight and see if they mention this or if it's just, kind of swept under the rug. But
I think that's an interesting point. A lot of people are wondering how that's going to be handled.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I know I'll be tuning in tonight just because sheer curiosity,
And yeah, I guess also when you were part of Aces and Eights, you kind of got to work with a lot of the kind of top guys in TNA, Kurt Angle and Sting and guys like that. Is there any sort of standout match that you'll remember from this particular run?
I enjoyed all that stuff. I enjoyed being in there with Sting. I really enjoyed being in there with Kurt Angle. I mean, Kurt's phenomenal. He speaks for himself. But I think that, like on the other hand of that, there were probably some guys I regret not getting to work with. Only being in TNA for a year and doing that heel character and stuff. Like, I really would have loved to have had a match with AJ Styles. Would have liked to have had a match with Bobby Roode. I think those guys are just two really stand out TNA performers. Two of the top of the game right now in the entire business. And then, I enjoyed working with Samoa Joe tremendously, and he's become a friend of mine, and Magnus, and they just TNA has a lot of depth, I think, roster and wrestling wise. And there was some good matchup potential there that we never got to see, So, but that, it is what it is.
And when we let our listeners know that you were coming on the show, there's a lot of kind of buzz about it. And one of our listeners, Bob DeGrand, he wanted to kind of express how much he'd enjoyed your role as the outlaw Isaiah Cash and Rinka King that you did a couple of years ago. And I just wondered if you could kind of tell us about that experience and getting to work in front of that crowd, what that was like.
I'll tell you what, I loved it over there. I really did. And you can watch the YouTube clips, like especially of Scott Steiner, climbing the barricade and going into the crowd in India. And I've said this before after I did Rinka King, like, it had such a raw, real feeling to it over there. It reminded me of seeing clips from the early 1980s of, like, Stan Hansen and Bruiser Brody, coming through the crowd in Japan, the way that the seas would part. And there was genuine fear at seeing these guys and these monsters, and they're just such an attraction and so much believability. And I think that it's a shame that Rinka King didn't up for season 2, because we had that there in India. I mean, we really did. And I remember, I had a lot of matches in that thing too, and it ended up being revealed that I was the guy behind Jeff Jarrett's faction and all that. But like, a lot of times I hear that I'm an underrated talent, but I had a series of matches over there with Trevor Murdoch that I really loved. Were some of my favorite, that I've had in my whole career. And talk about an underrated guy. I mean, we just really clicked, had good chemistry, and it was pretty cool mixing it up with him because then we both ended up being pro wrestling Noah guys in Japan and stuff like that. So, I really enjoyed Ring Ka King. The production was good on it, and that kind of gave a birth to the idea for me to go forward with the Aces and Eights thing, because once I portrayed Isaiah Cash, I knew that was something that was, close to home with me. My granddad's a motorcycle collector, the whole family, biker type people and stuff like that. So it was kind of a perfect fit to go from that and move into the Aces and Eights thing.
Absolutely, and I guess the other, one of the other characters that a lot of people associate with you is from the Straight Edge Society, the Luke Gallows character of CM Punk. And it seemed like, because WWE had kind of gone PG and a lot of fans were annoyed about that, but it seemed like this kind of Straight Edge Society, a lot of people were really intrigued as to how this was going to progress, and it seemed like for you, especially, a character that you could really sink your teeth into. How did you become involved with that, and did you enjoy that experience of getting to work with them?
Yeah, I enjoyed that, and that thing kind of just fell into my lap. I had finished doing Festus, and they wanted to repackage me, and the idea was for me to be a masked character on Monday Night Raw. So I went to Universal Studios and hired a guy and had a very elaborate costume and mask designed, and kind of tried to go all out on it. And I went down to, I guess it was FCW in Tampa at the time, and went down there for a week to try this thing out and do it in front of people and in front of a crowd and stuff like that. So at the same time, CM Punk, they had sent him down there to basically pick out a big guy to be like a heater for him, because he was going into a feud with the Undertaker, which we all found out later that he didn't need a heater anyway. But he was down there and he was looking at some of these guys, and they had giants and bodybuilders and big muscle guys and every type of guy, and he just kind of was like, well, what about Festus? He's here and we know that he can go, and I trust him, and we're buddies anyway. So it kind of, when they came and asked me about it, I was like, well, yeah, absolutely, that sounds perfect. So that's kind of how that all came about.
And what was it like working with CM Punk? If you were buddies with him already, what was it like being around him and in that faction?
It was great. Myself and him and Joey Mercury, Colt Cabana, and Cliff Compton, who used to be Domino, are like a really, really, really tight little group, and us just getting to be on the road together and talk about wrestling and do what we love to do. And I like Punk as a friend and respect him as a performer, but I don't think until I was ringside watching him do what he does, like on a house show where he had 25 minutes and creative freedom, that really sink in, the type of performer that he is and the way that he connects with people. And, that's why he is where he is. I think it's awesome. Very proud of him.
And with the Straight Edge Society, was there ever anything that you were going to get to do in that storyline that we didn't get to see?
I think that, the Straight Edge Society came to an abrupt halt at SummerSlam 2010, going into the match against the Big Show. Joey Mercury tore his pectoral muscle in that match, and the following days after, Serena was abruptly released due to whatever that was, personal issues with the company and stuff like that. So it all kind of came crashing down right there. So I think that, it came to a very abrupt halt, and then as that happened, they decided they wanted, Punk to move to Raw by himself, and that was kind of the end of the line. And that's when I kind of saw the writing on the wall for me in WWE, is going from, where we were positioned in the show to working superstars or, working the FCW guys that came up for a dark match or something. So I was 26 and kind of ready to go. So it was a nice time to kind of, close that door and, move on.
And I kind of wondered what it was like for you, because when you left the WWE and then when CM Punk kind of the whole pipe bomb angle happened in the summer of 2011, and your name was mentioned in a promo with Vince McMahon, Was that a sort of surreal experience to kind of see your friend being able to do that on TV in a storyline fashion?
No, it wasn't at all because, when I left WWE, I saw that as a new challenge. I went there at 21, so I wanted to go and experience wrestling around the world. And I knew that I had the confidence I could do very well at it. And I think that a lot of guys, unfortunately, don't. And I did very well at it until I decided to come into TNA. So I was in the Congo with no television or no internet when that took place. It was in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And I had no idea. So I landed here, I think back in New York, getting ready to connect to Atlanta, like 7 or 8 days after that promo had taken place. And I turned my phone on, and, there's just, 150 text messages and a barrage of voicemails and missed calls, and are you going to show up on Raw next week? And I had no idea what anybody was talking about. I had to YouTube it on my phone. I went, oh, cool. And then I shot him a text and said, hey, man, thanks for putting me over. But when I talk to Punk all the time, but we try to stay away from the wrestling stuff because I feel like, I know a lot of people talk to me about it all the time when I'm home. So I can't imagine how many people talk to him about it all the time when he's at home. So
yeah,
we pretty much keep it to potty humor,
Yeah, definitely. And and like I said earlier on, I think one of the things that struck me when we were about to do this interview was that you really have played a variety of characters. You did the Festus gimmick, the Straight Edge Society, the Outlaw and Ring of King, and then Aces and Eights. For you personally, what one of those characters did you find the most challenging to sort of get your head around and get into?
I think Festus was the most challenging getting ready for it because I was so young in the business. I was still pretty green, especially as far as doing stuff on WWE television. Very green. And then I had to kind of learn a new wrestling style as well because I couldn't, it was like going the opposite way. Like, as a wrestler, the best thing to do is to be in shape and to have your timing down and to, whatever. I'm a brawler anyway, but scientifically to have stuff in your repertoire that makes you stand out, makes you different, makes you look athletic. And now it's kind of like, okay, we're going to do all that, but you got to wrestle like you're mentally challenged. So I had to kind of revamp and rebuild, but luckily it didn't throw me off as much as it might have because a year prior I had done the same thing because they're getting ready to promote See No Evil, and they decide that they need a fake Kane character. So, I would leave developmental practice, go get something to eat, and go get a workout, then come back and watch Kane from 1998. And I had to practice and learn every movement, every mannerism, everything like that. So it's kind of like I got like a early education in portraying different characters, So that helped a little bit. And then Arn Anderson kind of took it as a special project to turn Festus into a monster. I think that worked for a few years.
And when you were doing the Festus gimmick, was that a gimmick that obviously you said that you were quite young at the time, you were 21. Is that something that you saw as being a long-term gimmick, or did you kind of see it as something that would maybe be a stepping stone to eventually being repackaged and doing something else?
Well, I think when you're given an opportunity like that, I was signed when I was 21, I was 23, I think, when I started doing that. To me, I was happy to be featured on television and to be a part of it. And when they started, getting behind us a little bit and stuff, it was all very exciting. But in the back of our minds, we always knew that if Festus could never speak, or there was no reason to explain why Festus was the way that he was, that we were never going to get really, out of the middle and out of the tag team mix. And, pitched a few ideas that never ended up coming to fruition for that character because I always thought that Festus would have turned out to be a great monster heel, You could have put Jesse in the suit right beside me and said that, we had come to avenge Terry Gordy's death because they had never even mentioned that Ray was second generation, and that was kind of the buzz at that time. And then, I was watching some old tapes and I realized the last thing that Terry Gordy ever did on television was wrestle the Undertaker as the Executioner. So I had this plan in my head of how they could have really played that out with video packages on television and bringing Michael Hayes out. And, us saying that we did this to get in there and all that stuff. And it never ended up, becoming anything, but I always thought that it was a neat idea anyway.
It sounds like a great idea. Was there positive response when you sort of suggested that?
I pitched it to Vince McMahon, and he seemed like he liked it. It was right after I had that match on SmackDown with The Undertaker, and then shortly thereafter, for whatever reason, the creative stuff kind of took a completely different direction with Jesse and I, and we ended up, being separated probably, 6 or 8 months later, for whatever reason. But.
And obviously, with just one more question about the CM Punk SES portion of your career, obviously we would find out later on when the DVD came out and stuff that CM Punk wasn't very happy when the title was taken off him and given back to the Undertaker, and you were kind of in the straight edge society at that point. Did you guys sort of was there any change in the sort of dynamics of the locker room when Punk's kind of getting visibly angry at the fact that he's got this kind of really big run and then all of a sudden it's kind of being taken away?
Well, I mean, here's the thing with CM Punk, and I think that people, maybe not so much now as a couple of years ago, kind of misconstrue him and who he is and what he is. Like a lot of people will ask me if, is CM Punk a jerk? Is he this? Is he that? I've heard this, I've heard that. But the thing about CM Punk that I've always said, and he's my buddy, and I'll say it publicly if he ever hears this, that he has an extreme passion for this business and for what he does. And he's a guy that unlike some guys, is not afraid to voice his opinion and say what he feels. So, I just think that him getting frustrated was a sign of his passion and stuff for the business. And I think that now people have come to accept it more, that they know him and they know the quality of performer that he is and the staying power that he has, So that's just him.
And like we mentioned at the start of the interview, you are the person that people are talking about right now in pro wrestling for leaving TNA, and there's been a lot of other kind of releases and stuff that have gone on this week, and I felt we kind of had to ask you about this. There's a lot of internet rumours that people are saying TNA is in trouble and that Taking Impact on the road maybe isn't working out as well as they had thought it would be financially. I just wondered, in the last few weeks that you were with the company, was there any signs of trouble, or is it a positive move that's kind of working for the company?
It always looked to me on the surface like it was a positive move. The houses for those live TVs looked good. I don't know what it costs to go on the road and produce a live television like that. I'm sure that it's expensive, but I think another thing that people don't know is none of us know what the TNA bank account looks like or what the Carter family bank account looks like. So, I mean, Panda Energy is a huge company. I don't know that we can necessarily infer that they're in trouble. I certainly hope and want to believe that they're not, because I would hate to see 30 wrestlers lose jobs. I think for me, this, whenever the negotiations kind of stopped on Tuesday night, I was home back in Maryland with my family. We were eating dinner, and they were like, "Oh, sorry, it's going this way." But I wasn't, because I've been in this position before, and I know how well I did when I wasn't with WWE. And I think a lot of wrestlers kind of look at leaving a big company like it's the end of the road. I never do. I look at it as a new set of challenges. I'll be taking off and going overseas in September. I got like 11 or 12 bookings in August already. So you got to just hit the ground running. And this is, if you're in this to make it a career and not just a run or a stint, I think you have to look at that. I know I kind of bent the question and brought it back around to myself, but I'm hoping that they're not in trouble, because I would hate to see a whole big mass of guys sitting there looking for work and not maybe necessarily knowing the best avenue to take to get it,
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned earlier on about TNA's roster, and arguably they have a lot of guys there with a lot of potential. Yourself that was there, and there was Austin Aries, Bobby Roode, James Storm, all these sort of guys that are, great wrestlers, really good characters. But I think sometimes people feel that the Sting and Hulk Hogan and people like that being maybe more heavily featured on television is something that they would rather see the younger guys take a bit more of a feature on the TV show. When you were there, was there conversations from sort of creative saying, we're doing this because it's going to benefit you in the long run, you young guys, or was there ever any sort of conversations about why these kind of older stars are being quite heavily featured?
No, I think that that's a nostalgia kind of thing, because you can't deny who and what these guys were to the business. So, I mean, you're always going to hear both sides of the coin on that. I'm not a guy who wants to bury anybody or say anything like that. I thought that, at times there could have been more of a mix, but I don't know if I'm not going to be one of these people like the internet does and point the finger and say, these guys are this age, they shouldn't be on TV. That's not, I don't feel like at this point yet that's my place to say. You know what I'm saying? Of course, any wrestler who, no one's just going to say, well, no, I think whatever's happening on TV is fine, because anybody worth their salt, it's the old saying, if you want to be the world champion, you shouldn't be there. And I agree with that. So would I have liked to have more TV time? Yeah. Was I in a lot of segments every week? Yeah. So, I guess it's, what's the saying, 6 dozen, half the other, whatever the hell they say, But I don't have anything to complain about because my story would never finish being told,
Yeah.
So I think that if it would have played out the way that I kind of figured it was going to go, that I would have probably been a heavily featured act on that show. And, maybe at some point I will be again. Who knows,
And also, you mentioned earlier on about there was certain guys in TNA that you kind of wish that you'd got to work with that you maybe didn't. Is there any kind of off the top of your head that you wish you'd managed to kind of work a program with?
Well, my biggest thing was, especially when we did the thing with AJ, which I thought was great television, I really wanted to have a match with AJ Styles, and that never happened. Bobby Roode, you mentioned Austin Aries. There's a lot of great talent in that locker room. And I think that, if I were there for another year, 2 years, there could have been some great stuff with me and those guys that it didn't get to happen. But, in this business, we don't say goodbye, we say see you later. So maybe down the line sometime.
And what about you in terms of your plans for the future? You said you've got other things that you're going to do. Is there anything that you can tell us about that's coming up where people can see
I don't want
you?
to say it yet, but as it kind of comes to fruition and it becomes absolutely clear what the plan is, I'll definitely announce it on my Twitter account so that everybody can follow me and where I'm going. I got a full independent schedule for the next month, but after that, I think things are going to change up, and it's always wrestling related with me. So just stay tuned.
And how can people, if you get any plugs you want to do, anywhere that you're going to be, or how people can get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'll be announcing my dates on my Facebook pages and on my Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. It's still at Impact Doc right now. That's probably going to be changing over the next week or so. But yeah, follow me there. And anybody with booking inquiries, I'll go anywhere and everywhere. So get in touch with us at bookbiglg@gmail.com. Bring Luke the Doc to a town near you.
Luke, thank you very much. We hope that we'll get to see you again soon.
All right, man. Well, yes, maybe I'll come on again in a month or two, and we'll talk more about what's going on.
Biscuits and gravy, maybe